Introduction. Translation of Pitaka texts from Pali into English. The Myanmar Pitaka Association was founded on the 20th of August, 1980, with the primary aim to promote an understanding of the Pitaka texts as interpreted and accepted in Theravada Buddhism, through translations of the Pitaka texts from Pali into English. After the translation of the original sources is completed, it was originally intended further to translate the commentaries and sub-commentaries of the Theravada school of Buddhism. The implementation of translation project. Soon after the Myanmar Pitaka Association was founded, there was an intensive search in the whole country for qualified translators. The whole of the year 1981 was taken up with this task and with the assigning of particular books to those translators who were accepted after some testing. Altogether, about 20 translators worked on the translations. From the time the translation work started early in 1981, 4 Dhamma consultants were always on hand at the headquarters of the association, and were available for consultation by the translator. The major part of the translation was completed within a period of some few months. Nevertheless, much editing work remained to be done on the translation manuscripts. The editorial committee. The editorial committee was formed towards the end of 1983. This committee decided to work on the Dhyana Nikaya first. It also decided that instead of publishing 3 separate complete books from Dhyana Nikaya, it would be better to publish selected suttas from the 3 books, as that would take up a shorter time to finish and at the same time cover a wider field of subject matter. Thus, the committee had chosen 3 suttas from Silakkhandavaga, 3 suttas from Mahavagga and 4 suttas from Pathakavagga in collected form as a book and published under the name of 10 suttas from Dhyana Nikaya. The editing of the book was completed in November 1983. The book came out in 1984. In the same way, in dealing with Majjhima Nikaya, 25 suttas cash were chosen from Dlapanasa, from Majjhimapanasa, from Aparipanasa and published as separate books. From Anguttara Nikaya, Khuddaka Nikaya and Samyutta Nikaya also selections were published. Thus, there are a number of gaps in all the 5 Nikayas. Nevertheless, during this time, we have been able to bring out a fair number of translations from various Nikayas. After publication of these books, the editorial committee feels it is time for us to fill up the gaps and present complete books to our readers. Here again, we start filling up the gaps with Dhyana Nikaya. Our first book is Silakkhandavaga. This is followed by Mahavagga and Pathakavagga. Silakkhandavaga. This is the first book from Dhyana Nikaya, the collection of long discourses of the Buddha. It is the division of discourses on morality. There are altogether 13 suttas in this Vagga. They are Brahmajala Sutta, Samathanaphila Sutta, Ambajtha Sutta, Sonadanda Sutta, Kiddhanta Sutta, Mahi Sutta, Jalaya Sutta, Mahasiyanada Sutta, Pathapada Sutta, Subha Sutta, Kavada Sutta, Lahika Sutta, and Tevajja Sutta. Of these, Brahmajala Sutta, Samathanaphila Sutta and Pathapada Sutta were included in the 10 suttas from Dhyana Nikaya, the first book published by Myanmar Pitaka Association in 1984. 1. Brahmajala Sutta, the Net of Perfect Wisdom. This is the first sutta in Silakkhandavaga and is the most well known. Once the Bhagava was traveling from Rajagaha to Nalanda with a following of 500 bhikkhus. The wandering ascetic Suppiya and his pupil Brahmadatta were also traveling the same journey. This discourse was given to the bhikkhus in connection with them. Suppiya was all the time maligning the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, while his pupil Brahmadatta praised the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. When the bhikkhus reported this matter to the Bhagava, he said, "Bhikkhus, if others should malign the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, you must not feel resentment, nor displeasure nor anger on that account." He also told them not to feel pleased, or delighted, or elated, should others praise the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. Minor morality, middle morality, higher morality. The Buddha also pointed out that a worldling, Pathajjana, when he praises the Tathagata, might do so only in respect of trifling and inferior matters, a mere morality. This means morality, sila, as such is trifling and inferior when compared with concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, pathafad. The Buddha further explained to the bhikkhus the 3 kinds of morality, viz. Minor morality, Kala Sila, middle morality, Majjhima Sila, and major morality, Mahasila. Minor morality is basic morality, most of which is applicable to all the other two are more comprehensive, mostly applicable to samanas and brahmanas. The profound, tranquil and noble Dhamma. The Buddha then continued thus, Bhikkhus, besides morality there are other Dhammas which are profound, hard to see, hard to comprehend, tranquil, noble, surpassing logic, subtle and intelligible only to the Pantas, Aryas who have attained one of the four Maggas. The Tathagata has set them forth after realization of these Dhammas by himself through Sabbapatthi Uttanana, perfect wisdom. Anyone wishing to praise correctly the true virtues of the Tathagata should do so in terms of these Dhammas. This, in fact, is the Dhamma which surpasses the 62 wrong views of the ascetics. Numbering 1250. Kanku Asui, Javaka suggested, let your majesty attend on the Bhayavi, and if you should attend on him, your mind might become clear and calm. King Ajatasattu accepted Javaka's suggestion. Then, with his full retinue of ministers, attendants, etc., the king set forth from Rajagaha to the mango prove of Javaka. There, the king saw the Bhagava, who was sitting against the middle pillar of the pavilion facing east. He approached the Bhagavad, paid homage to him and stood in a suitable place. He looked again and again at the huge assemblage of bhikkhus who were seated in perfect silence and calm as the waters of a clear lake. He was, indeed, very much impressed by the peaceful assembly of bhikkhus. Questions on the fruits of the life of a samana. King Ajatasattu then asked the Bhagava, can you, venerable sir, reveal to me the advantages to be gained, in this very life, from being a samana? The Bhagava gave his answer to the above question with the example of a servant and of a farmer. It occurred to them, independently, thus, the state ought one's existence once conditioned by meritorious deeds and the resultant effect of such deeds, etc. Had I done meritorious deeds I could have been like the king of Magadha who enjoys to the full the 5 pleasures of the senses as if he were a deva. Now it were better for me to shave off my hair and beard, don the bark-dyed robe, renounce hearth and home and become a recluse leading the homeless life. Thus reflecting, both the servant and the farmer become recluses. Having become recluses they exercised self-control in bodily, verbal and mental actions, were content with what they could get for food and clothing and took delight in solitude. Now that they are recluses, one ton would not be proper for the master and the landholder to call them back and let them be a servant or a farmer. Instead, the master and the landholder should pay respect to them, welcome them and invite them to be seated, make offerings of the 4 requisites and provide security and protection for them according to law. This is the advantage of being a samana, personally experienced, in this very life. Higher and better advantages of a samana's life. King Ajatasattu next asked the Tathagata whether there are other advantages higher and better than those previously mentioned. The answer was in the affirmative. The Tathagata then told him about a householder, or his son or anyone else who might have heard the Dhamma taught by the Tathagata. After listening to the Dhamma that person developed faith and conviction in the Tathagata, felt like leaving the household life for the homeless life of a recluse. He gave up his wealth, left his relatives, shaved off his hair and beard, donned the bark-dyed robe, renounced hearth and home, and became a recluse leading the homeless life. On becoming a samana he practices self-restraint in accordance with the fundamental precepts, Patamokasini va Urasalevvit. Sijub moral precepts, Sila Sila, Majjhima Sila and Made Sila. Well, he has his sense faculties guarded, he attains mindfulness and clear comprehension, he is contented, he dissociates himself from the 5 hindrances, nivarana, and from all demeritorious factors, viz. Covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, rusticsness and worry and doubt. Eventually he attains the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th jhanas, one after the other. The attainment of each one of the jhanas is an advantage of being a samana, personally experienced, which is higher and better than the advantages previously mentioned. When he has reached this stage he directs and inclines his mind to the development of insight knowledge, vipassana, by which he can create a mentally generated form complete with all organs. Next, he directs and inclines his mind to the development of psychic power, Abhidhamma, with which he wields the various kinds of supernormal powers. He also directs and inclines his mind to the gaining of the hearing power, like the divine power of hearing, Tipitaka. Directs and inclines his mind to discriminating knowledge of the minds of others, Sutra. Directs and inclines his mind to the knowledge of past existences, Abhidhamma. Directs and inclines his mind to the divine power of sight, which is extremely clear, surpassing the eyesight of men, Tipitaka. And finally he directs and inclines his mind to the knowledge of extinction of moral intoxicants, Asavakayana. The attainment of each one of these 8 knowledges, vijjas, is an advantage of being a samana, personally experienced, which is higher and better than the advantages previously mentioned. The highest and best advantage. On attaining the asavakayana, the bhikkhu truly understands dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the practice, path, leading to the cessation of dukkha. He also truly understands the asavas, the cause of the asavas, the cessation, extinction, of the asavas, and the practice leading to the cessation, extinction, of the 4 savas. The mind of the bhikkhu who thus knows and thus sees is liberated from the asavas, viz. the craving for pleasures of the senses, kamasava, the hankering after better existences, bhavasava, clinging to wrong views, dithasava, and ignorance of the 4 araya truths, avijjasava. This knowledge of extinction of asavas, asavakayana, is the highest and the best advantage of the life of a samana. The Tathagata himself has said thus: Great King, there is no other advantage of being a samana, personally experienced, more pleasing and higher than this which one can see for oneself. King Ajatasattu becomes a lay disciple. At the end of the discourse, King Ajatasattu of Magadha took refuge in the 3 gems, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. He pleaded with the Bhagava to take him as a lay disciple from that instant to the end of his life. The king also asked the Bhagava to accept the admission of his guilt, that is, killing his father for the sake of gaining sovereign power, so that he would restrain himself in the future. The Bhagava replied, Now, as you have realized your guilt and admitted to make amends, we accept your admission. Then, King Ajatasattu of Magadha paid obeisance to the Bhagava and departed with his retinue. Soon after the king had left, the Bhagava said to the bhikkhus, this king has destroyed himself. Bhikkhus, had not this king put his father to death who ruled with righteousness and kingly virtue, there would have arisen in him, here and now, the clear and undefiled eye of the Dhamma, Sotapadimagga. Note: although King Ajatasattu failed to attain Sotapadimagga, immediately after listening to the above discourse given by the Tathagata, he did gain some other benefits. For example, he could now sleep well at nights, and having developed much faith in and devotion to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, he did his utmost in promoting the welfare, progress, and promotion of the Buddha's teaching, sasana. For these acts of merit done out of faith and devotion to the 3 gems, instead of suffering in the Avisiniraya, he had to suffer only in Lohikumbiniraya, a lesser Niraya. After the completion of his term in that Niraya, and after performing and fulfilling various acts of perfection, parami, he would become a Paksha and finally realize Panibbana. Commentary. 3. Ambathasutta. This discourse is named after the youth Ambatha, a pupil of the Brahmana Pakkarasati. Once, the Bhagava was making a tour of the country of the Kausalans, with a company of bhikkhus numbering 500, and stopped at Ikanangala forest grove, near a Brahmana village. There was much talk among the people about the Bhagava's arrival and about the supreme attributes of the Bhagava. The Brahmana Pakkarasati wished to verify the news, wanted to make sure whether he is really an arhat who is perfectly self-enlightened. He thought that it would, indeed, be good to pay respect to such a person worthy of veneration. So he called his pupil Ambatha and told him to find out whether the Bhagava was a truly great man, one who possesses all the 32 bodily marks mentioned in the Vedas. For a great man possessing these marks there are only 2 alternative destinies. One, leading a household life, would surely become a universal monarch, who has come to the throne by virtue of righteous conduct, ruling over the 4 island continents, 4 oceans, or one leading a homeless life of a recluse would be a Buddha worthy of special veneration, perfectly self-contained, etc. So young Ambatha took leave of his teacher Pakkarasa and set forth with a company of young Brahmanas to the Ikonangala forest grove where the Bhagava was slaying. On his meeting with the Bhagava, young Ambatha was disrespectful, rude and insolent in his behavior towards the Bhagava, saying a few words here and there, walking about or standing while the Bhagava was seated. The Bhagava then reminded him about the purpose of his visit to the Bhagava and to keep his mind well on it. He also said that Ambatha was indeed ill-taught and ill-trained. This made Ambatha very angry and he retaliated by disparaging the Sakyans, saying that they were of low birth, etc. Thus, he degraded the Sakyans 3 times, and quite severely too. So the Bhagava thought it was the proper time for him to talk to young Ambatha and asked him about his lineage. On getting his reply that he was a Kanhyana by lineage, the Bhagava pointed out to him that whereas the Sakyans were the descendants of a master race, he, Ambatha, was a descendant of a slave girl belonging to one of the Sakyans. But Ambatha was reluctant to accept or to reveal this fact. When the Bhagava again asked him about his ancestry he remained silent. When the question was repeated also he was silent. But, when Sakka, king of the Devas taking the guise of the Bhagava and Ambatha, Ambatha got frightened and admitted that he was, indeed, a descendant of a slave girl. Knowledge and practice of morality. Vijtakarana. After that, there was some more talk about the lineage of Ambatha, and about Brahmanas and the Khattiyas. Towards the end of the talk, the Bhagava said to Ambatha, "Eminent are the Khattiyas among people who put reliance on their lineage. But among Devas and men, he who is endowed with knowledge and practice of morality, stands out as preeminent." The Bhagava then added, "Ambatha, those who are not bound by notions of birth, lineage or pride will realize for themselves perfection in incomparable knowledge and practice of morality." Young Ambatha then asked the Bhagava about the incomparable knowledge and the perfect practice of morality. The Bhagava gave a detailed reply to this question. Thus in this text, there is a long description of the 3 kinds of morality, Kalasila, Majjhimasila and Mahasila, description of mindfulness and comprehension, dissociation from sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt, and description of the attainment of the 4 jhanas. This part deals with practice or conduct, karana. After this, there is a detailed account of the attainment of the 8 kinds of knowledge, vijjas, viz. Insight knowledge, vipassana, power of creation by mind, supernormal power, the divine power of hearing, knowledge of minds of others, knowledge of former existences, divine power of sight, and knowledge of the extinction of asavas. This section on knowledge and conduct is a very important part of this sutta, for it is definitely mentioned here that it is not one of high birth nor linkage but one endowed with the incomparable knowledge and perfect practice of morality, who is the most eminent and most noble among devas, brahmas and men, revealing the 2 bodily marks. Then, the Bhagava went to the covered walk outside the monastery. Ambatha followed the Bhagava and examined the 32 bodily marks of a great man. He noticed almost all the 32 marks except the 2, the private part encased in a sheath and the long extensive tongue. The Bhagava, knowing that Ambatha was perplexed and very much in doubt, by exercise of his supernormal psychic power, revealed those 2 bodily marks to Ambatha. Ambatha was satisfied and convinced that the Samanagattama was fully endowed with the 32 marks of a great man. Ambatha returned to his teacher, Brahmana Pakkarasa, and reported to him that Samanagattama was fully endowed with the 32 marks of a great man, and not Pruali. At that very instant, a strong desire rose in Brahmana Pakkarasati to go and see Samanagattama himself. Brahmana Pakkarasati approached the Bhagava. On meeting with the Bhagava, Brahmana Pakkarasati told the Bhagava that Ambatha was being foolish and asked the Bhagava to forgive him. Brahmana Pakkarasati next examined the bodily marks of a great man on the body of the Bhagava. To him also, The Buddha revealed those two bodily marks with the exercise of his supernormal psychic power. Brahmana Pakarasati was quite satisfied with what he saw. Then he made offerings of alms food to the Bhagava. Brahmana Pakarasati personally attended on the Bhagava, offering choice hard and soft food. With his own hands all the Bhagava caused him to stop, signifying he had had enough. Delivery of discourses to Brahmana Pakarasati. After finishing the alms meal, the Bhagava delivered a series of discourses to Brahmana Pakarasati. He started with a discourse on charity, then he went on to morality, celestial realms, faults of sensual desire, vileness of sensual desire, defiling effects of sensual desire and advantages of freedom from sensual desire. Then, finding that the mind of Brahmana Pakarasati was in a fit condition to take in the Dhamma, the Bhagava also expounded to him the four Arya truths. Brahmana Pakarasati becomes a lay disciple. Just as a clean, unsoiled piece of cloth readily takes in the dye, so also, Brahmana Pakarasati took in the truth and gained the eye of wisdom, that is, he attained Sotapatti Maganana and then and there realized that whatever has the nature of arising has the nature of cessation. Thus, Brahmana Pakarasati readily took in the Dhamma. Then, he addressed the Bhagava extolling the Dhamma and requested the Bhagava to take him and his family as lay disciples. 4. Sonadanda Sutta. This is the discourse given by the Bhagavad to the Brahmana Sonadanda. It is an exposition of knowledge and morality. Once, the Bhagava was making a tour of the country of Anga with a company of 500 bhikkhus. He stopped at the town of Kampa and stayed by the bank of Lake Gagara nearby. The Brahmana Sonadanda, from the town of Kampa, came to see the Bhagavad. After exchange of greetings and some conversation, the Brahmana Sonadanda requested the Bhagava to elucidate to him the meaning of the terms morality and knowledge. Thus, the Bhagava gave a discourse on morality and knowledge 6 and the same lines as he did in Samaphala Sutta. First he dealt with minor morality, middle morality and higher morality, then going on to the 4 jhanas, and the 8 categories of knowledge, vijjas, beginning with insight knowledge, vipassana, and culminating in asavakkhayana. In this discourse, a distinction is made between accomplishment in morality and accomplishment in knowledge. The 3 kinds of morality, and the attainment of the 4 jhanas constitute morality. The sight categories of knowledge constitute knowledge. Morality and knowledge, however, are interdependent. This fact is pointed out in the text, both by the Bhagava and the Brahman Sonadanda. It once said, knowledge is washed clean by morality and so is morality washed clean by knowledge, just as one hand washes the other or one foot washes the other. One who is accomplished in morality is also accomplished in knowledge. In this world, morality and knowledge are deemed to be the most supreme. Thus, both morality and knowledge are very important in our lives. At the end of the discourse, the Brahman Sonadanda requested the Bhagava to take him as a lay disciple, who takes refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. Kittadanta Sutta. This discourse was given by the Bhagava to the Brahmana Kittadanta. Once, the Bhagava was touring the country of Magadha with a company of 500 bhikkhus and stopped at Ambalathaka garden, near the Brahmana village of Kanamata. Brahmana Kittadanta of Kanamata village was preparing a great sacrificial feast involving the sacrifice of a large number of bulls, heifers, sheep, goats, etc. This Brahmana, together with his friends, came to see the Bhagava and requested the Bhagava to tell him about the 3 mental attitudes towards sacrifice together with their 16 supporting factors. Sacrificial feast of King Mahavajra. To him, the Bhagava related about the sacrificial feast of King Mahavajra, a very rich king of the times long past. This king wanted to hold a grand sacrificial feast as he wished to have prosperity and happiness for long. He consulted his minister, Purahita. Purahita did not advise the king to hold grand, expensive feasts due to existing unsettled condition, the country being rankled and hurt by thievery and plundering in towns and villages followed by highway robbery. When peace and prosperity returned, the king again asked his minister about holding the grand feast. His minister then advised the king to consult and get the consent of the Khattiya vassals, ministers and officials, wealthy brahmanas and rich householders. They gave their consent saying, "Do make the offering, it is the suitable time, your majesty." Thus, these 4 consenting parties constitute factors supporting the sacrifice. The remaining 12 supporting factors include such qualifications as having good and pure lineage, good appearance, wealth, intelligence, generosity, ability to assess past, present and future events, and for Brahmana Purahita, to be a past master of the Vedas, and to be able to recite mantras, etc. The correct mental attitude toward sacrificial feast is to have no regrets, saying, "Alas, my immense wealth has become depleted, as one is preparing to hold the feast, 2, or while one is holding the feast, 1, or after one has held the feast." Instead of harboring regrets, one should give away freely and feel glad about it with a clarity of mind. Thus should one hold a sacrificial feast or offering. Sacrifices entailing less trouble and exertion but more fruitful than the above. The Brahmana Tipitaka then asked the Bhagava whether there were other forms of sacrifice which entail less trouble but more fruitful than the above. To this question the Bhagava replied in the affirmative and gave a list of the various forms of sacrifice which are all more fruitful and more rewarding than the sacrificial feast. The list is as follows. Almsgiving in constant practice, the traditional sacrifice dedicated to bhikkhus established in morality. 2. Donation of a monastery. 3. Taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. 4. Observance of moral precepts. V. Sacrifice relating to attainment of jhanas. Vi. Sacrifice leading to attainment of asavakkhaya, which is the excellent and the most imminent perfection in sacrifice. Request for lay discipleship. The Brahmanic Tipitaka next requested the Bhagava to take him as a lay disciple from that time on to the end of his life. He also set free the bulls, heifers, sheep, goats, etc. that had been brought for sacrifice. The Bhagava then delivered a series of discourses in their sequence to Brahmana Tipitaka, in the same way as he did to Brahmana Pakarasati. Ambathasutta. Brahmana Tipitaka also took in the Dhamma readily, just like a clean, unsoiled piece of cloth takes in the dye. And he came to be established in Sotapatti fruition. 6. Mali Sutta. This discourse was given by the Bhagava to Mali and his followers in a monastery, near Vesali. Here, the Bhagava explained to Mali why one should not confine oneself to one-sided concentration or to two-sided concentration in practicing the Dhamma. In fact, the Bhagava instructed his bhikkhus not to confine themselves to one-sided concentration, for example on visible object, or to two-sided concentration, on visible object and sound, nor to be satisfied with just the attainment of jhanas. The bhikkhus were told to take up the noble practice, brahmacharya, under the guidance of the Bhagava with a view to the realization of the 4 noble fruitions, viz., Sotapatti fruition, Sakadagami fruition, Anagami fruition and Arahata fruition. The attainment of Arahata fruition means becoming an Arahat with the realization, by himself, the emancipation of mind, Siddhavimutti, an emancipation by insight, Arahata Pathafaya, through extinction of dsavas,